Hello, chess family. It's me, National Master Jesse James, and today we're taking a look at Bobby Fischer's My 60 Most Memorable Games. We're on game number 7, Olafsson versus Fischer, Pride at Goeth. In this game, this is going to be our first game we see in Bobby Fischer's games that he's going to be playing the King's Indian defense, at least from his My 60 Most Memorable Games. And we're going to see that Olsen actually gets a really nice advantage, but unfortunately it slips at the end, and Fischer just was able to create good endgame pawns and win the game. Let's go and take a look. Here we go. We start off with c4, knight f6. We start off with the English, but we're going to be transposing. Knight c3, g6, d4. Now we're in a basic d4 opening. Bishop g7, e4, d6, knight f3, and castles here. A really interesting way of playing the King's Indian defense. This is pretty much just the standard way these days. Bishop e2 and pawn to e5. Excuse me. Pawn to d5 here, making this Petrosian's variation. Typically, I believe these days, everyone usually just castles right here. And then we go ahead and play knight c6. And apparently this is called the Aronian Tamanov variation. And after pawn to d5, it gets played knight to e7. And then we get these really cool games where you're pushing pawns on both sides of the board. With that being said, this main line these days was not played. Instead, Petrosian's variation of d5 gets played, taking away this knight to c6 move and grabbing some extra space. So Fischer continues with knight b to d7, bishop g5, a very annoying move, if I might say so myself, whenever I play this variation. Although Fischer does give an improvement here in a few moves. Pawn h6 gets played, bishop h4, and then pawn to a6. So Fischer said this is a nice slow way of playing it, which I agree. It's an old system that really hasn't been refuted, as he says. With that being said, he does recommend this line of playing pawn g5, which looks like it is the most popular move these days. The idea is after the bishop moves back, you have ideas of either going knight h5, maybe even knight c5, but main idea is to try and get f5 in, and you can go for some nice kingside attacks because you just have so much space. With that being said, Fischer chooses the old line with pawn to a6. Knight to d2, a nice move here. A lot of people here would castle, but this knight d2 move is really interesting. Well, I'll go ahead and let you see what's going to happen in a few moves. So, queen e8 gets played, another very standard King's Indian move. Why did queen e8 get played? Well, think about it. Fischer is playing the King's Indian defense, and one of the main pawn levers you're trying to do is play this pawn to f5. With that being said, you're going to have to move this knight, and with that being said, you don't want to lose your queen in the pin. So the queen goes to e8, getting ready to run over to the king side whenever you get your pawn f5 in. Well, this is the main idea to play f5 here, and this is what the whole knight to d2 was about. Can you figure out the move here? What does Olafsson what is Olafsson's plan here to stop this idea of playing pawn to f5? Maybe even knight to h5. All right, I hope you found it. The idea here was to play pawn g4, which is very popular these days too. These days, we want to stop this f5 from happening, so g4 got played. And, well, sometimes they even castle kingside these days, but in this game, he's going to go ahead and go queenside, which makes a lot more sense to me. All right, knight h7 got played, again trying to get this f5 move in. And queen c2, you can see that he's just crushing down on this square, saying, no, you're not playing this f5 move. In these King's Indian defenses, it's very important, if not the best thing you can do, is to get this f5 move in. This is the only way that you can try to create this counterplay. All right, we're apparently out of the theory now. Knight g5 got played. Nice move here, saying, please take my knight. And, well, I think a lot of people here might be very interested in taking this knight, but you're going to be losing your dark square bishop. Not the best here. Pawn h3 gets played, just defending the pawn. And knight c5 here. So I'm already starting to like Fischer's game here, as he was able to get his knights in the game. He's now maybe going to be able to play this f5 move because the bishop's opened up here. Castles over the queen side, and then bishop d7. Be careful, if you thought about playing f5 here, it turns out just to be a weak move because, well, we're going to be creating some weaknesses here for Fischer. So f5 was the idea. Bishop takes, pawn takes, pawn takes, pawn takes, and then rook to g1. And yeah, this king's a little too opened up, and it's really hard to defend this pawn. Bishop h6 ideas, you can see that these pawns are just getting attacked right here, so definitely not something I would recommend here. Here I can just play the standard f3 move, and h4 is going to be coming up pretty soon. All right, back to the game. In the game, Fischer plays the very strong and reasonable looking bishop to d7. Pawn to f3 still gets played, and I like this move by Fischer here. He goes ahead and plays knight to a4. I am curious why he doesn't try the move pawn to b5, which looks like it's just a very natural move here. Of course, if you take, well, black's actually going to be better here, because you can't take back as b5 is well defended, and also this a2 pawn is now under attack, so we even have b4 threats. With that being said, Fischer does choose this idea of knight to a4. Making some trades here definitely does not hurt his position. Knight takes, bishop takes, pawn b3. Now we see we got some weakness of the pawns over here. Bishop runs back, and bishop goes to f2. Here taking on g5 again just really doesn't help out too much. After bishop takes, h4. I would think this would be the idea, trying to open the position. We have a few interesting ideas here, but believe it or not, the one the computer likes the most is just g takes on h4 here. And after rook takes on h4, you get this nice little tempo of bishop f6, and you can jump on this diagonal right here. At this point, the game's about even, and black can even play something like king g7 in the future too, just to trade off rook, so you don't have to worry about the h-file. All right, back to the game. Bishop f2 is being played, and now another move I really like in this position, the best move in the position. What do you play here as black? All right, I'll give you a hint. White just played bishop f2 for a reason. What's the idea? Well, white wanted to go ahead and play c5 himself, and this is very typical. Whenever you're playing the King's Indian defense, white typically goes queenside, and black usually goes kingside, right? Follow the pawn structure that tells you where to attack. With that being said, Fischer knows the idea, and was able to stop it. What's a good way to stop this c5 move here for white? Remember, I do encourage you to push pause. This is a very important move that's going to throw the strategy off for white here. What happened? Well, I hear someone saying pawn to b6. Not a bad idea, but you could always pivot back with something like h4. And maybe that was one of the other ideas with playing this bishop to f2, was to stop, well, maybe trying to get you to play b6, but then also just get your pawn to h4 going over here. Well, that could be it, but yeah, this b6 does not does not seem to be pushing you far enough, right? Here, the idea was for black to play c5 himself. So Fischer plays c5, and well, this is a very interesting move because a lot of people here would just go ahead and en passant. But en passant here gives black the better position. After bishop takes on c6, or even pawn takes on c6, both are good here. Maybe pawn takes c6 looks like the most natural. But after bishop takes c6, you guys see ideas about knight e6 and d4. And well, this knight's just going to be king of the board here. Most likely it'll be traded off, but that only opens up the dark square bishop. And once the dark square bishop gets into the game, well, black's going to be very happy when this happens. So, c5 got played here, and I like this move because it's definitely gaining some queenside space. Now b5 you can see is a very good move, and either playing b4 or even taking on c4, this is going to help open up lines against this king over here on the queen side, especially because you have to play this move of b3. This is why I like that knight a4 move. Whenever you move your pawns up, it gets easier and closer for you to go ahead and do your own pawn lever to attack. All right, back to the game. Pawn h4 attacking the knight. The knight just jumps back to h7. Bishop b3. And here we go. Pawn to b5. You got to create that counterplay on the queen side, or else white will just create all their own, and you'll just be kicked off the board. And here, well, this is where Olafsson goes wrong here. And this is where the quote comes, Pride Goeth. He gets a little too ambitious here and plays knight to b1. Although this seems like a good move because we're going to try and put our knight to c3, maybe take on b5 and gain some extra squares, well, this allows Fischer to get that good move in. Black to move. What do you play here to get an even position, if not better, in my opinion? All right, hopefully you found it. What's one of the most important moves to play, or one of the most important squares when you play King's Indian defense? That's the f5 square. Here we go. Pawn to f5 gets played. Now is the correct time here. One of the reasons why this knight was so good earlier was that, well, earlier if you had tried this move, let's just say f5 gets played, right now you could take, and after bishop takes, you have the very nice idea of knight to e4. And you can see that this e4 square is just ours. If the bishop ever takes, you can just take with your pawn. You got the bishop pair, and maybe even bishop d3 is coming in the future. That's why this knight b1 move is so bad, because you lost this tempo. And now, well, Fischer's just able to create his counterplay very easily. f5, takes. Bishop takes f5, nowhere to block. White went ahead and played queen to d2. You don't really want to play bishop d3 here. There's so many good moves to play here. Probably best is just to go ahead and trade off. Bishop takes, queen takes. And, well, rook takes on f3, just snags a pawn. Although if you're feeling a little bit more ambitious, you might look at this idea of pawn e4, looking to open up this diagonal with queen e5 ideas in the future. That computer gives us up a pawn, which makes sense. That being said, this does not look like the worst pawn sack I've seen, in Fischer's game. All right, let's go ahead and go back to the game. Queen d2 got played, just moving out the way. Pawn to e4 gets played, so you get your e4 in move without even having to sacrifice. And again, this diagonal becomes so weak. Well, here we go. White went ahead and played rook d to g1, trying to create some counterplay against the h6 pawn. And I really like this move by Fischer. What would you play here as white? I mean, as black? This is a move that many people would have a hard time playing. But believe it or not, we're just going to go ahead and take on f3. Most people here will go ahead and try to defend the pawn, and that makes a lot of sense. But after pawn takes, bishop takes, this is another mistake by Olafsson. He takes on h6 right away. Simple chess here, we just play rook to a7. And now, well, in most lines, black is just going to be better. Which seems weird here because we're going to be losing our best defender. With that being said, well, we're able to open up this game, and, well, the rest of the pieces left on the board are just going to create good counterplay here on the queen side. The game ends pretty fast, in my opinion. After bishop takes, rook takes, king takes, game is even. In fact, most lines here, black is just better. Bishop d3, another little mistake here. What do you play here in this position? Again, I like the way Fischer plays. Whenever you're attacking, you need open lines, you need open files. So b takes on c4, rook g1 check. Yeah, it's really hard. If you go ahead and play something like b takes c4 here, queen g6 is the top move by the engine, which is pretty cool here. And you just see you have this passed pawn over here. So you're going to be pushing this if they go ahead and trade right away. So takes, queen g6 also stops the rook from coming over to g-file. And yeah, this is just a -2 position, almost -3 here. It's not going to last too long here. All right, back to the game. White went ahead and played rook g1 check. Again, not the best move here as there's not really a strong attack. Black controls all the squares over here on the king side. King to h8, queen c3 check. And, well, very good defense here by Fischer. What do you play? Yes, right now is the best time. Let's go ahead and trade off queens. So queen goes to e5. Queen takes, pawn takes, and now you see you have two connected passed pawns. And this is what I was talking about earlier in the game, prior to Goeth. You had a very good position. All you did is made that one little mistake because you really believed too much in your position. And now black just has a beautiful win here with these two passed pawns. And yep, what do you pass pawns? You're going to push them. Here the bishop took, rook took. Pawn takes on c4, really the only thing most people here will do because if not, you're just down a pawn. And well, you got these two passed pawns. They just get pushed really fast. Knight f6, knight to d2, pawn f2, nice tempo off the rook. Oof, only one square away, way too close. Rook h1, there really was no other good square for this rook to move to, right? I guess you can go to d1, but I don't know what I think it does the exact same amount as it does on h1. And so rook h1 gets played, pawn e4, king to d1, and the game is over here as you get another free tempo. Pawn e3, knight f1. All right, I'll give you a second here. What do you play here as black? Fischer to move. Get these pawns pushing. All right, this was an easy one. Hopefully you did not get tricked out. Here you just play the simple move of, there's only one winning line here. Rook to e5. Nice simple threat. It's defending the pawn, but we're also threatening pawn to e2 check, which pretty much forces the next move of king e2. And now the final move here. You just got to win the e2 square, and it's game over. Which piece you're going to use? Of course, this knight right here. And there's a simple path to control this e2 square. The knight just goes to h5. King to f3. Notice, well, you can't stay right here, and you can't go knight takes e3, as knight g3 check just wins the game. So, after the king ran to f3, what do you play here? Final move of the game. Yes, nothing hard here. You just play the pawn move to e2, and there's no way they can stop from getting a pawn across the board. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed our first game with Bobby Fischer playing the black side of the King's Indian defense. We'll see you in the next one.